All right. Hi.
Hey, Tommy, how's it going?
Not bad.
All right, guys, so today's actually going to be episode 11 of the Testimonial Technique. I've got Tommy Walker on with me today. I don't even want to try to pronounce your domain name. I know it's unique.
It's Tommy.ismy.name.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you about that too. So what provoked you to start out with this domain?
I didn't start with this domain. It was actually a backup domain. So back in like 2008, I believe, the .name domain first came out. And I thought, the only way that this is going to be a useful domain, because it's kind of a garbage, like .name is kind of a garbage domain. I said the only way that that's going to be a useful domain name is if I register ismy.name. And the problem with the .name domain is that you can only do third-level registrations. Yeah. So you can only have a something.something.name. And I said, okay, well, if it's going to ask me what my first and last name is, I'm going to say my first name is Tommy and my last name is Ismy. So now I own is Tommy.ismy.name. When I first started blogging, I was actually going under a completely different domain, but that domain got hacked and I couldn't fix it. So the only other domain that I had to fall back on was that one.
Right.
And that's I set up the blog and started blogging underneath that. And at the end of the day, people were like, what was it that got you to do that? And the truth is that it was a backup domain. But then I really also realized that all you really have at the end of the day is your name. Like, you don't have, it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. It doesn't matter any of that type of stuff. All you really have at the end of the day is your name. So I figured, okay, well, Tommy is my name. Let's make a thing out of this. And they did. And it's been working. So there we go.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's cool. So I guess for anybody listening, Tommy actually reached out to me through email and linked me over to an awesome blog post he wrote on his blog. And I checked it out. It was all about guest blogging. So I figured today we could probably talk a little bit about guest blogging because that's something Tommy's really familiar with. I'm personally still pretty new to guest blogging, so I've only done 3 that have been officially published, so it's still pretty new to me. But I guess really just to start with some basics, what got you started with blogging in general and just online marketing, I suppose?
Sure. So I failed into it. Blogging came way later in my online marketing career. Back in 2006. I was working at a gas station. I graduated from college, and I did what most college kids do, and they go home, and I did what most 19-year-olds do, and I knew everything at the time, and got kicked out of my house. So I started living at this place across the street from a gas station. I worked at the gas station. People liked my personality, and somebody from a company called SellMyTimeshareNow.com had said, like, we really like your personality. Think you would be great on our sales team over here. So I ended up working there for a little while. Failed miserably on the sales team. Apparently, I have a hard time asking people for credit card numbers. They said, you're a hard worker. We notice that you're putting the time in. You're really spending the time on the phone and making your dials. But perhaps this other department would be good for you. So check out the online marketing department. And they said, if you're not making your own money within the first 3 weeks, then you're fired. And I made my own money within the first 2 weeks. And from there, just kind of started doing the online marketing thing, not just for them, but also for local bands and things like that. And it's kind of just taken off. A few years later, I got into blogging after doing about a year's worth of client work, working for myself. And that's where I really started to find my voice. That's where the Tommy.ismy.name came from. Came into play, and it's been kind of a build from there. But it's been, I've been blogging for 4 years now, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, I guess, I know, we talked a little bit before the show. Obviously, you said that you do some consulting work. Is that like your major, your major focus, really? Like, what's your most major focus with the blog? I know you're also doing the you said it's called Fireside Chats, right? That's the
Mindfire Chats.
Mindfire Chats. Okay.
Yep. So I have a couple of main focuses. I do the Mindfire Chats. Right now we're working on seeking sponsorship. So that's going to be, I'm trying to shift that towards my primary revenue stream. I do consulting with businesses, from small to medium to regional based, working on getting into the higher profile. It's a matter of time.
Yeah.
And I do guest blogging for hire, so I will ghostwrite for people, or I will do content development for other blogs, and help them get on the right path with their content dev. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So my three main revenue sources right now are the consulting, the blogging for hire, and my show properties, which we're seeking sponsorship for.
Right. So, in terms of, I guess, guest blogging, do you want to talk a little bit more about like how you got into that and how, I guess, that's maybe helped your blog and
Sure.
where the benefits are in that?
Sure. So where I got started with guest blogging because I read this article by John Morrow on Copyblogger, who was talking about, he was launching his guestblogging.com program, and full disclosure, I am an affiliate, but what he was talking about in his promotional post was talking about hitting that glass ceiling, where you create content, you do everything you can for your own blog, and you can't seem to get beyond that certain point, right? You just hit that kind of plateau, and that's it. And it really resonated for me, and I was so I signed up for his program, and that program in particular, guestblogging.com, changed my life because it gave me the confidence that I needed to reach out to Darren Rouse of ProBlogger, which was the first like big major blog that I ever did a guest post for. And what I really discovered at that point was that guest blogging in itself is more of a relationship creator than it is anything else. And from there, just I started to get more confident. I started to, people started to read my stuff. Some people came over to my site and started slowly but surely building relationships with the new people and establishing those relationships and just keeping it going, right? So from the new people that I had come over to the site, I had said like, hey, where else would you like to see me guest post? And then I would ask those people to help me make the introduction to the blogger. And we just kind of kept going from there. And it's been a build, and it's very similar to just in-person networking. Hey, do you know this person who needs this thing? All right, absolutely. Could you introduce me? Sure. And go from there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely, like I said, I've only done a few, but so far the results have been cool. Like, I like to see that people are, I'm basically going to a high traffic place where people are already reading the content, and then, not only building relationships with them, but possibly the owner of the blog,
Yeah, and I think that's the most important aspect when it comes to guest blogging. One of the things that I've found is that a guest post by itself is not going to be the thing that makes you, but it's the introduction to a relationship, right? When someone's creating content for your site, you want to make sure that they have just as much of an interest in your site and your readers as you do, right? If I were to say like, hey John, could I write an article for your site, and you've taken a really long time to create a certain type of tone for your audience, you would want to make sure that I'm not just saying like, all right, cool, here's any old junk that gives links back to my site, right?
Right.
As a person who contributes to sites, like bigger sites now, one of the major things that I've learned is that the best guest posts don't come from here. They come from hours upon hours upon hours of research of that site. When I look at a guest post or I look at a site that I'm going to be guest posting for, I'm reading as many comments as possible. I am looking at all of the different posts that have made the most popular list. And I'm looking at all these things and trying to find out, like, what's the tonality of this post? What sort of structure are they using throughout? Those types of things, because I want to know what stands out to that audience, and I want to use that type of stuff to wrap my message. Like I think of it as more of a packaging, right? If I have a message that I want to get across, I want to make sure that I'm packaging that message in a way that that audience is going to receive it well. And the only way that you can really tell that is by doing the extensive studying. The byproduct of that is that you get a post that gets shared a ton or gets a lot of comments. And that, of course, if you're the top, one of the top articles on the site that month, you just did a ton of extra work for that blogger that they don't have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
like, hey, thanks for bringing me all that traffic. Like, let's talk further about some other stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, I guess, let's say someone's listening to this and they've never done a guest blog post before. They're interested in guest blogging.
Yeah.
Something that I felt like, I've had some luck with just like thinking of things that I could actually write about.
Mm-hmm.
What do you generally, obviously you're looking at these blogs that you're considering you're going to be writing on and looking at the comments, kind of seeing what type of content they have. What do you usually do in terms of like thought process? Like, what are you going to actually write for them? Like, where is this information coming from? Are you learning from other blogs and then just sort of coming up with ideas yourself, or is there a place that you go to come up with these ideas, the content that you're actually going to write?
Yeah. So if I'm looking at if I'm looking at a potential site to blog for, and what I'm looking at, I might have an idea of like, okay, I want to talk about landing pages, for example, right? Okay, what sites have a good landing page focused, audience, right? What audience or what blog has a well received landing page conversation going on? That's one approach. But oftentimes what I'll do is I'll look at a new blog and go, without an idea of what to write, and say like, what does this blog need, right? What haven't they talked about in a while that their readership really enjoys? What's going to go over well. And the way you find that is by looking through the comments and literally, reading this stuff until your eyes burn. Finding this type of information and going like, here are gaps in the knowledge, right? Because are you familiar with the information gap theory?
No.
Okay, so I don't remember who the scientist is, but there's the information gap, which is basically with every new thing that you learn, there's a new thing that you don't know, right? So there's always going to be this sort of information gap, and a good, if you read a good piece of information, then it's going to get your mind reeling in a whole bunch of different areas and make you think like, okay, I want this, or okay, I want this. By finding the stuff that's already there and then seeing like the people's response, where people talk about landing pages, for example, and I'm just coming up with this off the top of my head, so if it's a terrible example, it's a terrible example, and I'm sorry. But if someone's talking about landing pages, for example, and you're like, okay, you need to focus on X, Y, and Z, and it turns out that the audience really wants to know more about Y, but it hasn't been covered, right, in a while at least, then you can revisit that and you find out that information, you find out what that information gap is by reading those comments and seeing like, okay, this is how that article was structured. And then you can see that and go to the blogger, hey, I noticed on this site this was a really well-received thing. I was thinking about following that up with this subject, focusing on Y. Here's some sample headlines that I was thinking of. Would you be interested in an article like this? That way there, you're not going into a guest blogging relationship with some preconceived notion of what it is that you want to pitch, but taking a look at that specific audience and going like, this is what I see that you guys need, and this is how I want to fill that gap for you. Because, as a blogger, you sometimes don't even pay attention to that type of stuff. You pay attention to it, obviously, but it's much easier to get lost in your own information and you get on your own train of thought. So when somebody else says like, hey, your audience really wants this, you go like, oh yeah. And it starts to, it's a good start to a relationship because it shows that blogger, hey, I'm looking out for your audience too. I'm not just looking out for distributing my own thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I never really thought about that too much, to be honest with you. It's more like, because I I think the first one I wrote was about a social media platform that, you know, anybody that's doing anything online for blogging could use it, because it's basically a way to get more shares on your content. And the guy had never even heard of it. So,
Right.
I mean, for him, it's definitely good because his audience, you know, someone in his audience commented, and then they went and left a comment back and how they use the system and the website, and like they obviously spent hours with it. So it was really useful for his audience, basically.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that approach either, too. You know, so that's basically that's kind of the other side of the coin, right? Is if you're trying to introduce somebody like Leo Ridrich of Buffer App did a really good series of roundup posts for a bunch of different sites and started leveraging those roundup posts to go to other sites, and he included a link to Buffer and all of these great Twitter tool, you know, roundup tips.
Yep.
That's fine, because you're still doing them a service, right? You're still saying, like, let me introduce you to something that you wouldn't otherwise have thought of.
Yep.
But that's kind of the main difference. Like, both of those approaches are still audience first. You know, let me introduce you guys to something you may not have seen before. Versus, right, if you worked for that company, now that would be, or if you worked for that site, now you kind of put this different spin on it, and you're going to approach that very differently, right? Because now you have something really invested in whether or not you get that post. And what we have to avoid as a community, right? Not just as you know, whether or not to guest post or not to guest post, but what we have to avoid as a community is to really stay away from the super selfish approach, where it's like, let me just get my own thoughts and ideas out there and leverage your platform, you know, because now you're not looking at people as people, you're looking at people as numbers, and nobody wants to be a number, you know. And it's very transparent when that happens. Like, it reeks when that happens. And as far as long-term relationship building goes, you know, you do that with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sites. And you figure that all of your big name bloggers are all going to know each other if they're in the same field.
Yep.
You do that more than a handful of times, and you're just going to get yourself blacklisted, you know, because everybody's going to be like, who's this guy? Yeah. They'll talk about you. Like, you know, and that's something that you want to avoid, because you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, of course.
You know? So, Eddie out.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, you know, guest blogging for you has been beneficial for your own blog, as well as building relationships. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. Definitely something I hear quite a bit about. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the strategy? I know we talked a little bit about it before the show too. The strategy that you kind of used with me, like, to kind of start things out. I don't know if you want to dig into that a little bit. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So, sourcing opportunities and sourcing relationships is probably one of the more difficult things that I think we can do, right? You know, when you think to yourself, like, hey, I want to get my name out there a little bit more, there's a huge internet, and the vastness of the internet becomes very apparent to you, especially if you have an idea that you want to get out there. Derek Halpern calls it the drafting technique, and what I have done is I've developed a handful of systems that allow me to find content that is similar to mine, and then approach people in a way where I know that what I'm putting out there is going to be of some interest, because you've already expressed in some way that you're going to be interested in it. So what you did, for example, or what you and I, how our relationship started, for example, you had shared an article that Derek had written and on Twitter. And what I did was said, okay, I went to that article and found all of the people who shared that through Twitter, because you can do a Twitter search for people who shared that. And I started approaching people who expressed some sort of interest in that article and said, like, hey, by the way, I have this other thing that, you know, you might be interested in. It's about this. It takes that to the next level. Would you be interested in taking a look at that? Now, some people, you know, I did get a handful of angry responses from that. So you have to be, you know, that's something to be aware of, is that can happen if you approach it the wrong way. It's all about what you say, not how you say it, and what you say. But if you approach it in a way where you're like, hey, by the way, come check out my link, nobody's gonna pay attention to you because nobody knows who you are. But what I did was I wrote a series of emails that took more of a personal approach. Hey, if this is something, I've noticed that you shared this thing over here. I wrote something that's very similar to that. If this is something you might be interested in, let me know, and I'll send the link over to you. I don't want to, send out links on the first contact.
Yeah.
For some people, and for plenty of people actually, that was something where they're like, yeah, absolutely, send the link over. That sounds great. Other people were like, screw you, quit emailing me. Yeah. And then, then the majority, or a good majority of the response is non-existent. But using that approach, you get an idea of who is genuinely interested in new content, right? Because what that does is that shows you who's interested in new stuff, but also for that other person, especially if you're saying like, hey, this is that thing I wrote that's similar to this other thing that you enjoyed, that gives them the opportunity to be the first responder on something. If you're one of the first people to share an article, that makes you look good to your audience, right? Yeah. Because nobody else is sharing this stuff, and you get the opportunity to look like the person who discovered this new cool thing, right? So obviously this doesn't work if you're creating crap content, right? At the core of it all, you still have to be writing good stuff. Otherwise, you're wasting yours and everybody else's time, and now you just make yourself look like a dink on a much bigger level because you scale it out. But that's basically the approach, right? So you find, someone who's written something similar or along the same lines. It's that information gap, right? If they've created something that exposes this gap, you fill that gap on your own blog and show it to the people who shared it originally, or link to it originally, right? You can do backlink checks on people, and find people who link to the original content. You can it's all about filtration, right? Yeah. I think that's really what it comes down to, and where the web, now Web 2.0, Web 3.0, right? We're getting into that kind of era, where there's so much information at any given point in time. Being able to create smart filters for the stuff that you have coming into you, and then also for the stuff you put out there to the world, that's what's going to help you to stand out. Because now I've created a filter for you. You got to share that with your audience, look like the good guy for finding it, discovering it,
right?
And now you've got this sort of filtration system going on, where you don't have to go out and find that. You just have good stuff come to you.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I have a tendency to ramble, too, so if there's reel me in if you need to.
No, you're fine. I haven't felt like I needed to jump in too much. I'm just kind of, obviously this is all, a lot of what you're talking about, I haven't done any of these strategies, so I'd hope anybody listening as well as myself, it's, just useful information in my opinion, But,
it's a lot of work, it is a lot of work, but it's work that's well worth it, because at the end of the day, you look like the good guy for, showing people some stuff. Oh, hold on a second here.
Sure.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I kind of had something I was thinking of based on, just for me, I guess personally, I've only had a select few people reach out to me on my blog personally, like to email me and tell me that they like my content, regardless, even the way that you're using a general template, it's still, to me, I've used that same approach I was telling you, I've used that same approach with people, and, it's common to find that, you might get people who won't respond or people that might be angry with you, but overall, I find that the best response is that people are willing to help you, and people do want to help you, especially if you're willing to give them something in exchange. I did something where I would, I was telling you already, but for anybody listening, I did a strategy where I just asked people for comments in exchange for giving them a comment on an article that they wrote. So basically, I would share their content or leave them a comment if they left me a comment, and there was a ton of people that were willing to copy and paste my blog URL and put it in their browser and actually go and take the time to leave a comment. And I actually I think I messaged over a long period of time. I think I did like 1,000 messages, very general message, and I think I got over 100 leads on my blog. And you know, that's pretty cool to me because they're free leads, and those people are definitely interested. You know, so it takes some time, but that's still cool. That's free leads. You know, some people pay for leads. You know, so. But I wanted to ask too. You know, with obviously writing on your own blog, and you know, you may not notice it as much when you're guest blogging, but do you notice a lot of visitors just from writing like lengthy, I guess, epic posts that you create? Do you see a lot of hits from like Google search engines, organic traffic?
That all depends. So there's kind of a few things going on in that question. Lengthy and epic don't necessarily have to be the same thing. They're not exclusive to each other.
Yeah.
You know, I've had articles, you know, that are 400 words do just as well as articles that are 2,000 words. What it really comes down to is how well, you know, are you getting everything you need to get across in the amount of words that you're using? Are you getting rid of the phantom words? So that's something to kind of keep important. Elements of Style says omit needless things. And that's really the first thing that you need to do, especially with web writing. With that type of stuff, do I get lots of search traffic? It depends. It depends on how well I've done the keyword research ahead of time, or how well I've kind of massaged that piece to fit within a keyword.
Yeah.
And it all depends on whether or not I'm actually looking for search traffic on that article too, right? There are some things that I don't want search traffic on because it's a discussion, and it's a discussion that I want to have with a smaller group of people.
Yeah.
So what I found though is that the more an article gets shared, the more the overall rankings on everything seems to go up. So if you're creating content that is getting discussed heavily, right? You're getting a lot of comments, and then comments are going to lead to shares because people are going to be like, oh, I commented on this thing, and, you know, hey, what do you guys think? Right? You kind of want that type of stuff to happen. But I think what you're really asking comes down to the type of content that you're creating in the first place, right? I look at content, I break content up into 4 different categories, and I have a very different intent with each piece of content that I write in this way. So I look at, is a piece of content supposed to be viral? Is it supposed to get shared throughout a community? Is it meant to start a discussion, right? So do we get talking about it?
Yep.
Is it meant to generate leads, right? So are people supposed to fill out a form or sign up for my email list afterwards, or is it supposed to make sales, which is a fairly obvious end goal? Keeping those 4 goals in mind, I write a piece of art or a piece of content with one in mind, right? So is this one that is meant to get leads, for example?
Yep.
If that's the case, then there are certain things that you put into that, right? There's a certain tone that you take where throughout the whole thing, you're kind of insinuating, hey, you should sign up, right? Hey, you should sign up.
Yeah.
And you see this, right? You see this with other pieces of content that's out there. And with something like that, I might massage it to the point where, you know, it's supposed to get search traffic. If it's something that I feel like is going to be, you know, a good source of revenue later on down the road, be it for one of my own, you know, smaller price point products, or for an affiliate product. That's something where, yeah, you want that to rank, and fairly well, and for a fairly high traffic keyword. I think I might have gone off track here, but yeah, it's something that it all depends, right? It all depends on what the piece of article or what the piece of content is supposed to do, whether or not I try to get it to do that thing, you know, try to get it to rank, or am I just trying to get it shared, distributed socially? Because there are certain things that will, like, for example, one of my most popular pieces was a guest post for chrisrogan.com, and it was about 106 excuses that prevent you from ever becoming great, right? That thing has then been shared well over 100,000 times. It's been picked up by, think with Google, their marketing team. It's been distributed quite a bit. But most people aren't searching for ways to bust their excuses.
True.
So,
it's more in the viral.
Right.
Factor.
Well, and it was written to be a viral piece, right? It was one that I wanted to be spread. So keeping that in mind, there are things that are going to be shared and distributed that aren't going to be searched for, right? And vice versa. People are going to search for things that they might not share publicly, If I were in the finance sector, for example, I would know instantly that a lot more of my focus should be on search engine optimization type posts, because I'm not about to put out there like, hey guys, do you know how to get out of credit card debt?
Yeah, and share that to all of your Facebook and Twitter fans.
Right. That's not something where it's like, okay, this is something we're comfortable talking about with each other.
Yeah.
Budgeting tips maybe, but you got to look at the way things are being distributed too. And I've created systems around the way content gets distributed. But that's a conversation for a whole nother time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just want to make sure you keep the intent of the content focused, whether it's on your blog or somebody else's blog. It doesn't really matter. Is it meant to be shared, discussed, generate leads, or make a sale? And then the other part is like, how are people going to discover this, right? Not everybody's going to discover something through search engines, and not everybody's going to discover things through conversation, through viral interaction. So you got to keep all that type of stuff in mind when you're creating, and then forget about it, right? Let it out of your head so you don't get in your head about the thing that you're creating.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope that answers the question in a very long, roundabout kind of way.
No, I think that's good. Good the way that you kind of split things, because I know that, I've written content where I'm like actually targeting something specific, but there's definitely things that I'd write about where it's like, well, I don't know if this is really going to work for, me trying to get this ranked on Google somewhere. Like, it just isn't what I'm trying to do with it.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is to realize that, like, with a new blog with a no backlink profile or a small, very weak backlink profile, your chances of getting ranked for something, even on the long tail, are so slim, because you have to just assume that 500,000 other people, 5 million people have already written on that same long tail keyword. It's very, very rare that a site without a backlink profile can rank for anything now, because the internet is so saturated. So that's Mark Zuckerberg came out with a law a couple of years ago called Zuckerberg's Law that basically says that people are going to every year share 2 times more what they shared the year before, right? So the everything gets shared 200% more, our share volume gets increased. And with that comes creation, right? We're creating a lot more than we ever did before. Which means that even the long tail is getting bombarded. So my opinion is, and this is just an opinion, right? And other SEOs might disagree with me, but my opinion is to first focus on content that's going to get shared and discussed virally, right, or through real people.
Yep.
Build up a backlink profile that way, and then start going after SEO keywords, because you can tell what people are going to want way faster and way easier than what a search engine's going to want.
Yeah. And
the search engines are only looking for that type of stuff anyways, right? Google is getting to a place now where they're saying, like, screw it. Like, we don't want people to game our search engine. We want our search engine to take social signals into account.
Yeah.
Right? So, a lot of my tests have shown that something that gets shared more on social media, your overall thing gets ranked higher, whether or not the key phrase is exactly what it's supposed to be. People are getting penalized now for having too much exact anchor text across the web.
Yeah,
so
there has to be a variety of
yeah.
text.
So, it's all that type of stuff to keep in mind. But, the people have said and have said for a while, and it's only becoming more and more apparent. Write for people first, and then worry about your search engines after the fact. You know, and on a long-term strategy, you're still looking at the same thing. You're still wanting to write for people first, and then maybe after you get a decent backlink profile, you can start going after targeted key phrases. But yeah, relying on search engines to do anything for you these days, you know, unless you really, really, really know what you're doing, you're better off just writing for people and trying to get that stuff focused, and getting that shared within groups and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to look at things. I mean, I know a lot of people consistently talk about all the updates and things, and obviously, as of recently, Google just released the Penguin 2.0, and that's to attack web spam and all kinds of other things. And I don't know particularly how that's affecting a lot of people. I haven't read into it enough yet, but I mean, that stuff is constantly evolving, and it's hard to tell. You know, I've heard stories when the last updates went out last year. You know, that ruined people's businesses.
And you know, for me, the biggest thing that I've found, like Mindfire Chats, for example, is a great example of this, right? I've created the show titles around stuff that could potentially get ranked. I'm not ranking in those areas yet. But what I've found with those, and I come from an SEO background, so like that kind of tells you something right there too. But what I've found is that with every episode that we've done, we've had 100% increase in our audience, right? That's important because that gives us more people to kind of work with when it comes to getting the thing shared or, you know, embedded on a site or whatever. And where was I going with that? The major thing with that is that, the biggest thing that I've ever learned, or the biggest thing that I've learned is that instead of trying to go from 1 to 10,000, which is what I think a lot of us try to do, right? We try to be the big name people. When we first start out, or even as we're going through, instead of trying to go from 1 to 1,000, go from 1 to 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 100, right? Set yourself incremental benchmarks, so you can actually like reasonably attain your goals. And then get that stuff out there, right? If you have 5 people, and this is one of the things that's kind of amazed me, right? I've been working with people who say like, I've got 100 people on my list, and I want to get to 2,000. If you have 100 people on your list, that's actually, you can reasonably have a conversation with 100 people, right? Ask those 100 people, hey, what do you want from me? What are the things that you really need right now? Really listen, take your time out and interview those people. Right. Set up, if you have an email list with 100 people, call them. You know, set up a Skype call and say like, hey, let's just talk about where you're at in your business right now. What you're going to find when you do that are patterns in people's wants and needs that aren't the generic patterns that other big name bloggers are filling, but things that are specific to those people. When you hear like entrepreneurs talk about minimum viable products, for example, that's really what they're doing. You know, I was just doing research on Instagram, for the way that they launched their product, and they went from, you know, virtually nothing to 1 million people in the first 2 months of being live, and they had 50 beta testers.
Wow.
Right? They had 50 beta testers, and when they said to those beta testers, hey, we're going live with a full product right now, those 50 people told people that they wanted because they created that product specifically for those 50 people who they were testing for. So, that's something to kind of keep in mind too, is that if you have a small audience like that, create something specifically for what they want. It's about what that small group of people wants, because then you're going to fill actual needs, not just what you think their needs should be based on what other big bloggers are doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good way to look at things, because I definitely think a lot of people probably wouldn't look at having a list of 100 or a couple hundred people really is all that, you know, they're just going to assume, well, I need more people on my list, and you could still do a lot with a small list.
You can do more with a small list because you can actually talk to those people.
Yeah.
You know, and here's kind of, for me, the prime example of that, the proof in the pudding for me was that with my second show with the Mindfire chats, I did a straight call to action. It was a very small list. It was like a 25 person list when I sent it out because I just started the thing up. And I said, like, hey, what do you guys really want? What do you want to see? And one of the first people who ever listened to any of my things, I mean, I got paid $100 for a webinar 4 years ago when I started out. This was the only person who actually paid attention on that webinar and has been following my work ever since. She said, I would like to see you do a chat about not giving up, right? Because I've been following your stuff from the very beginning, and I've seen how persistent you are with this type of stuff, and I would like to see that. And lo and behold, I did that. That was the chat that I did most recently. Yeah. I booked a few guests that I felt were some of the best on the subject, and we doubled our chat. We had more people on that chat specifically than any other chat before, right? I mean, we've been consistently doubling our traffic, but that one had more than, slightly more than double. I would say it was probably about 125%, which was great, and it grew the email list exponentially faster. And it's because I listened to what somebody on the original list said. It was a small list. I listened to what they said and said, okay, I'm going to create content around that. And I asked other people, hey, what do you think about that? And they're like, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And the feedback on that particular thing, because when you create something specifically, if I said to you, hey, John, I'm going to do this thing, and it's going to be just for you. We're gonna show it to other people, but I'm doing it with you in mind. What are you gonna do?
Of course, I'd love it.
Right.
Yeah.
You love it, and you probably be like,
everybody.
Right. Exactly. And you can do that with 100 people. You can't do that with 10,000. Not the same way. And that's kind of the big thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyhow, I get really excited about this stuff.
Well, no, it's cool because I mean, even one of the guys that I interviewed, he actually has been like coming back to me and helping me out, and we've been communicating a lot more than most of the other guests I've had on, and he's just been like really, really helpful. So for me to see that, like I actually put. And I probably could sign up for an affiliate account if I want, but I put an affiliate link for a product that I believe in, but he would actually make the commission on the interview, on the show notes, because he's been like that helpful for me, was giving me opinions about things, and we talked about like keyword research, whole other kind of ball game, but it's just cool because I know he's actually going back, and it's almost like he's someone I interviewed, but at the same time he's admitting to me, oh yeah, I've gone back and listened to all your interviews, and like I wouldn't expect that, especially from some of the people I might be doing. They got their own stuff going on,
Right.
But it's cool to me because it's like that. I've started to create a small little niche of people and group of people I can start communicating with and figuring out. Like I could go to him easily and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And that'll really play a big role in what I decide. If I'm always the kind of person that I ask everybody for opinions when it comes to everything I do. Sometimes I feel like it's a bad thing because I'm one of those people that I like to hear what everybody has to say, but I don't always follow what everybody says for advice,
Right. Well, it's impossible to do that too, and that's it. After a while, you do have to create kind of an awareness of what it is that you want to create versus what everybody wants from you, right? Yeah. Like I can tell you as an online marketing guy, people want from me, hey, how do you get famous overnight on the internet? Right. And I don't have anything for you on that. I'm sorry. Like, I've fired clients because they wanted me to tell them, hey, all you have to do to build your brand online is share interesting photos that are going to get shared, and that's it. That's what they wanted me to tell them, and that's not not the reality at all.
Yeah.
And you do have to distance yourself from that type of stuff, but from the people who are going, for me it was Brenda is her name.
Yep.
She said, I've watched your persistence throughout the years. I would love to see you do a chat on that and field questions that are related around that type of thing. That's something where it's like, okay. And the other part is like your keyword research starts to take care of itself for you too, right? To bring it back over to the SEO type conversation, how are people going to discover this if you want people to discover it that way? When people start telling you what it is that they want to see, it's much easier to hone in on what other people are going to be searching for that's related to that particular phrasing.
Yep.
Right? Instead of having to guess, like, oh, is it going to be blog topic ideas or blog topics that I'm going to write about here? Which one gets higher search volume? People are going to tell you, like, hey, I'm looking for some blog topic ideas. I say that because I ranked number 1 for blog topic ideas.
Oh,
right. But,
I might have to check that out.
Yeah. And I have a paid product around that too. But, which I have to actually write the email as soon as we get out of here. But yeah, it's something where if you're listening to what people are saying, then the rest of it starts to take care of itself, you know? And that's great because, you know, content creation and all of that type of stuff is so much more difficult when you're trying to do it throughout your own head. That if you can let other people do a lot of your work for you, then you're in a much better place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah,
like I said, I ramble.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. No, I like all this. This is good. I guess, you know, I'm just trying to think if you wanted to stick back to some more of these general questions. Was there like a particular, you know, I guess I like to ask this one. Was there like a first goal that you reached, like something that, you know, you start out and you just maybe it was making your first dime online, if that was something that happened to be a big thing for you, or maybe it was having, you know, getting your content shared on Chris Brogan's blog, you know, getting that guest blog post published, something like that. Like, what was like a major goal for you that just...
I remember it very, very clearly. So when I first started working for myself, it was because I had gotten fired over a pair of pants. The story's on my blog. I'm not going to go into it here. Plenty of people have heard it. But one of the first people that I started working with this company, and we ended up parting ways because it wasn't a good relationship at all. But one of the first things that I had done with them is I started at $760 a month or something like that, like $700 a month, and I had a $600 a month rent. So I was able to pay rent but not do much else after that. And it was bad. I mean, I was living off of tortillas, man. I was like, you know, renting a room and eating tortillas and soup. Like, it was bad.
Yeah.
And there were two things that happened. My first negotiation with them, I was able to double my pay, and I negotiated out of them. I said, look, here's the thing. Here's the problem right now is that I am tethered to my computer for 18 hours a day, and that's what I was working when I first started. It was 18-hour days because I was monitoring and trying to make sure I was able to acclimate to everything internet. And I said, it would be extremely helpful if you guys were to buy me an iPhone, because then I could, like, you know, go and live my life too and check stuff on the go.
Yeah.
And they did. They agreed. And that was probably, like, I remember when I saw that when you sent me these questions ahead of time, that was the first thing that came to mind. And it was such a rewarding experience because, I didn't have to buy the smartphone, and they paid me enough extra. I told them, like, they needed to buy me the smartphone and pay the bill. So I was able to double my income, get a smartphone, and not have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And it was all unlimited plan and all that type of stuff. And I was just like, I was ecstatic because that was one of the first times in my solo career that I was like, this is what I want and this is what I'm getting. And I'm not budging on this negotiation. And I won. And that was very exciting because, especially when you start working for yourself entirely, it's easy to just let people bowl you over. You know, oh, I don't want to pay you right now. Okay, well, let me just keep creating. I see that happen all the time with freelancers. And that was the first time where I was just like, yes, I win. And I just recently did that too with a company. I said, like, let me give me access to your software, and I will create this for you, and it will be a win-win. And they said yes. So negotiation, I think, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting to think about. I mean, I haven't thought about it too much for my own personal job, but I've read some stuff on, I think Derek Halpern has some content on his blog related to negotiation skills and things like that. And something I never, like I recently, like I was telling you, I'm buying my first home, and of course, in most scenarios, you're doing a little bit of negotiating when it comes to the final set price. And I mean, that's something I'm not all that great at, but definitely an interesting topic, because there's some pretty powerful stuff if if you're good at it.
Yeah, I think I just showed, like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's the thing is like you have to know what you have to know what you want, and you have to know what you're willing to settle for. But you can't ever get what you want, and this is in life. This isn't just with online marketing type stuff or buying a house. You have to know what you want, and you have to know what you're willing to sacrifice. And if there's anything I've learned from major successful people, it's that you know when to draw the line and when to walk away from a deal, just as well as you know when to kind of have a little bit of give. If you were to not be able to negotiate at all in your house, for example, you might, it might be you might have to be willing to walk away from it. But what I found is 9 times out of 10, something better does happen as a result of that. It's just being kind of aware of the opportunities that are coming your way and working to get those opportunities to be put in front of you. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've actually, my full-time job, they had recently opened up a position for basically a webmaster, and I was able to more or less go in an interview and show them all these things that I knew were working, and sort of give them that, like, a leverage to just show them, like, hey, that I've been learning all this stuff, even though I didn't go to school for any of these things. But it's still, something that I felt like I could help them. Like, they talked about, oh, we need someone who knows Flash, and, like, I've never done Flash. So I went out and actually made my own Flash video, like, from scratch. I, like, watched YouTube videos, so I could use that as just a bigger leverage point to, like, if they get other people off the street, like, coming in and doing interviews, beyond being there already for 5 years now, I've got even more leverage because I've showed them I'm willing to do what it takes to learn what they need.
There you go.
So, but yeah, I mean, I guess, I like this question. What would be some words of advice you might give others who want to get started online? Just in general, they want to start a blog or get started online, whatever it is that they have passion about.
Decide what you believe in and live like you mean it. I saw that on a button once and I loved it. Yeah, decide what you believe in and live like you mean it. I think that it's so easy to just give up, to say, like, oh, this thing's not working out for me, or, I tried this niche and whatever. If you're picking something based on, like, if you can't, and people have different opinions on this. My opinion is that if you don't live and breathe what it is that you're trying to talk about online, that's going to be totally transparent. And if you don't respect your blog in the way that it needs to be respected, how are other people supposed to do that too? So decide what you believe in and live like you mean it, and really fight your ass off to get what you believe in out there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice. I mean, that's kind of, I've had moments where I've wanted to give up and it's been tough, but, I just like the idea of, like, I see so many people that are doing amazing things, and the opportunity, like, there's just a whole world of opportunity out there when it comes to the internet and blogging and just anything to do with marketing online. And I just, being able to connect with people, I kind of, I tell this to a lot of people I interview. I started this because I was so interested in what everybody else was doing, and I was always following like these new little niches and trying to learn about everything there is to know. Almost sort of in a way figuring out like what it is that I really want to do. Like, do I want to do these strategies or these strategies? Like, because there's so many different things, and I kind of came to this conclusion. It was easier for me to just start talking to people and then finding out. Like for you, you are actually, obviously having success with guest blogging, but I could talk to someone else tomorrow who they want nothing to do with that, and they have a totally different strategy, but that works for them.
Yep.
That's what's so cool to me. Like, I've always kind of had this thing where I like to nitpick on people's brains, especially people that are, if I'm in the kitchen or something at work, and they got like a little break room, and the CEO walks through. Like, I just have this urge where I just want to start asking questions, like picking his brain about stuff, or just getting conversation going, just to feel like, I've got these people that are doing really well, and I'm learning from them.
Yeah, and you have to have a genuine interest in people too. That's something that I just recently heard from Jillian Smith on an interview I did with him.
Yeah.
And I think that's if you're passionate about learning about people and what they're doing, that there's definitely something. I mean, you can do that all day long, and that's something to kind of be able to follow too. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, cool. The big thing that I've been kind of going on more is just thinking about giving value and actually helping people. And knowing that in the long run, if I do this consistently over a long period of time, that it will work in my favor, as well as to anybody who were to do, if you help other people, it's just going to come back, and it should benefit you in some way, hopefully in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah, I mean, I guess, obviously you've got great content on your blog. I don't ask this question as often, but what would be some reasons people would like to connect with you online? Like, if people are to go check out your blog, are there particular posts that maybe I'd want to send people their way if they're just getting started, or just anything that might stand out? I kind of particularly like hearing about. I'm going to read it at some point. The post you said you had published on Chris Brogan's blog, because that sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I cover kind of a variety of topics on my own blog. I'm actually in the process of restructuring right now, so I'm not super comfortable sending people over there right now.
Yeah.
But I would say that check out my YouTube channel. I've got the Mindfire chats on there. I've got Inside the Mind on there, where I deal with different. I approach online marketing in two very different ways. One uses Inside the Mind as a very comedy-driven approach.
Yeah.
To package the information in a way that's easily understandable and fun to digest.
Yep.
And Mindfire Chats takes the conversation and brings a much deeper conversation that way. And then the different category pages on my blog, I've taken time to write some essays, essentially, in very different and unique approaches to social media marketing, guest blogging, things of that nature. So I guess really, I mean, the place is Tommy is my name, Tommy.ismyname or tommyismyname.com. And then just from there, go to town.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes so people don't, it'll be simple.
Right on.
But, yeah, I mean, I know we're shooting on about an hour here if you want to wrap this up. I think we covered quite a bit. This is, great information. It's helpful to me. I hope it's helpful for anybody who's still listening.
Me too.
But yeah, I like to throw this in at the end of every show. If you happen to know Tommy, maybe you work with Tommy, feel free to leave a positive comment, testimonial. You could do that on my blog or head over to his blog. Even if you want to do something simple, make a little testimonial video. If you happen to work with Tommy before, I think he'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, yeah, it was good talking to you. I guess we can wrap this up, and I'll keep in touch. Hopefully in the future maybe we could do another interview.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Bye.
See you later.